If you like this video and you want to see more like it, a day before it goes up on YouTube, head over to LBRY. It's an awesome alternative to YouTube and I absolutely love it. Hey everybody, it's your friend and your guy and your favorite bearded lady, Gardiner. I'll take that. So I don't know if you heard about this. But the RIAA, the Recording Industry of America, is attacking free speech and and open source software development. So let's dive right into this, shall we? So if you're not familiar, YouTube-DL is a command line tool that's used to download YouTube videos. It's primarily used on Linux and Mac OS, although I'm pretty sure they have a Windows version somewhere. I actually really like it. YouTube-DL is a terrific tool. It's very useful when you're doing commentary, criticism, or other fair use purposes. Yeah, I really like YouTube-DL, so I might be a little partial here. I also absolutely despise the RIAA. They are a terrible organization that do terrible, horrible things. Anyway, let's talk about what's happening. So the RIAA issued a DMCA request to GitHub against YouTube-DL. Now, this is already kind of a specious DMCA request for a couple reasons. First of all, this is a industry organization that's trying to enforce its copyrights by issuing a DMCA request against a tool that violates one of its license holders' technological means to prevent copyright infringement. I feel like that's rather torturous. That's like 6 steps to get from the RIAA to YouTube-DL. You have to go from the RIAA up to a copyright holder and then go over to YouTube, which then they have a technological means by which YouTube-DL is bypassing, and therefore YouTube-DL is violating the RIAA's copyrights. That's insane to me. Now, let's actually read the DMCA request because it's kind of interesting. Dear Sir or Madam, I am contacting you on behalf of the Recording Industry Association of America, Incorporated, RIAA, and its member record companies. Under penalty of perjury, we submit that the RIAA is authorized to act on behalf of its member companies on matters involving the infringement of their sound recordings, audiovisual works, and images, including enforcing their copyrights and common law rights on the internet. I don't know of a common law copyright. I don't think that's a thing. First, copyright violations. We have learned that your service is hosting the YouTube-DL source code on its network at the following locations, among others. Boom, whole bunch of them. The above list includes a representative sample of the YouTube-DL forks of the YouTube-DL source code being hosted on GitHub. The clear purpose of this source code is to 1. Circumvent the technological protection measures used by authorized streaming services such as YouTube, and 2. Reproduce and distribute music videos and sound recordings owned by our member companies without authorization for such use. We note that the source code prominently includes, as sample uses of the source code, the downloading of copies of our members' copyrighted sound recordings and music videos. For example, as shown on Exhibit A, the source code expressly suggests its use to copy and or distribute the following copyrighted works owned by our member companies. Icona Pop, I Love It featuring Charlie XCX official video, owned by Warner Music Group. Justin Timberlake, Tunnel Vision, explicit, owned by Sony Music Group. Taylor Swift, Shake It Off, owned/exclusively licensed to Universal Music Group. The source code notes that the Icona Pop work identified above is under the YouTube standard license, which expressly restricts access to copyrighted works only for streaming on YouTube and prohibits its further reproduction or distribution without consent of the copyright owner. And that the request for the Taylor Swift work identified above is to obtain, without authorization of the copyright owner or YouTube, an M4A audio file from the audiovisual work in question. We also note that the source code is a technology primarily designed or produced for the purpose of and marketed for circumventing a technological measure that effectively controls access to a copyrighted sound recording on YouTube, including copyrighted sound recordings owned by our members. All right, so that's all you need to really read. It's kind of long-winded and stupid, and it's a bunch of legal jargon. But suffice it to say, they're saying that the YouTube-DL team here made YouTube-DL specifically to violate copyrights of copyrighted music. And, you know, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I use YouTube DL for my channel. I've done it many times. For example, when I did responses to Linus Tech Tips or Chris Titus or Brian Lunduk even, I have used YouTube DL to download these videos for a fair use purpose. And there ain't nothing that the YouTube license or the RIAA can do to prevent fair use from being a thing enshrined in law. Here's the thing though. The RIAA has accused the YouTube DL team of prominently featuring links to Justin Timberlake, Iconopop, and Taylor Swift videos in the source code of their projects, and thereby encouraging users to violate the copyright of the RIAA's copyrights, or the companies that contribute to the RIAA. Well, I went and found a legit copy of the Git repo, and it does indeed contain some of the links that are mentioned above. And I can confirm that the inclusion of those links is universally a bad move on the part of the YouTube DL team. But when I read the words prominently featuring, my first thought was like, yikes, did they include like a Taylor Swift link as an example of how to use YouTube DL in the README file? No, they didn't. Did they feature links to copyrighted works in their man page? No, again. In fact, all of the links that I found in the README, which was coincidentally basically identical to the man page, are videos that appear to be owned by the developers of YouTube DL. So good job there, guys. So how did I actually find the links in question? How are they included in the YouTube DL repository? So I had to search the repository for code mentioning Icona, like Iconopop, and then I was able to find a link buried in YouTube DL /extractors/youtube.py. What's interesting though is that these links are stored in an array of YouTube URLs called tests, which leads me to believe that these links are meant to be used for testing YouTube DL. It's definitely not prominently featuring. I mean, these are buried in the code. Assuming that these tests were carried out, that might be evidence of copyright infringement on the part of the developers here, but I would not call that prominently featuring. So because of this whole RIAA mix-up, I wanted to offer my assistance to the YouTube DL team here. Now, I'm granting a license for all of the content on my channel, both past and previous, to the YouTube DL developers for the express purpose of testing YouTube DL. There you go. You're welcome. You can replace all of the copyrighted links with links to my videos if you want. But let's go back to the DMCA request, because this is really interesting. Quote, the source code is a technology primarily designed or produced for the purpose of and marketed for circumventing a technological measure that effectively controls access to copyrighted sound recordings on YouTube. Well, that's not how I see it. In my opinion, source code by itself is speech, and it's protected under the First Amendment, especially because, you know, source code isn't useful without some kind of interpreter or compiler. In this case, it seems like it's Python, so it would be an interpreter. The burden of legality falls on the end user to compile or otherwise run the software, and how they use it is where one can run afoul of the law. If I use SSH to access my own server, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing illegal about that. But if I use SSH to access a server I don't have permission to access, well, then that's a crime. But we're not banning SSH because it can be used in a crime. I don't know. I find that argument specious. Also of note in this case is this pleasant little excerpt here. Quote, for further context, please see the attached court documents from the Hamburg Regional Court that describes the technological measure at issue, also known as YouTube's rolling cipher, and the court's determination that the technology employed by YouTube is an effective technical measure within the meaning of EU and German law. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but RIAA stands for the Recording Industry Association of America, right? And GitHub is an American company owned by Microsoft, which is an American company. So where do these lawyers get off citing German and EU precedent for the issuance of a DMCA law, or a DMCA request, which is an American law? Now, I've heard some people say, oh, but the DMCA was like America's way of opting into international copyright treaties, but that's baloney. The law is American. The companies at question here are American. So why are we quoting German law? It doesn't make any sense to me. But all this is a moot point though, because as I've said, source code is free speech and the legality of using YouTube DL falls squarely on the person using it. There are many legitimate reasons to use YouTube DL, to bypass the technological means and protections and downloading copyright encumbered videos from YouTube. All of those reasons are fair use. There are many, many instances of fair use where you have copyrighted videos that you don't own the copyright to, and you have to bypass encryption or other technical means of protecting that content so that you can use it for fair use. Basically, what I'm saying is the RIAA is not only attacking free and open source software development at this point, they are unequivocally an opponent of free speech, and we need to do everything that we can to protect YouTube DL. Well, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Let me know down in the comments. I'm really anxious to hear what you guys have to say about this one. I want to say thank you to my patrons, all of whom make this possible. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it. If you want to help support the show, if you believe in the work that I do here, you can hit the link in the description to go over to Patreon. You can also become a channel member here on YouTube as well. There's links below for that. But that's going to do it for now. No matter what you do, whether you hit that like button or hit that subscribe button, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a blessed day.